Karima was a formidable force within the media, and I think her role for what she contributed has to be remembered. I met Karima when I was 19, just many moons ago, as an intern at a public broadcaster, and she was a producer, and I just thought, oh, this woman. And it so happened we were from the same township. And I think we joined at a time of turbulence within the public broadcaster, but also a time of change and radical change in South Africa. And I think Karima was that voice that reminded us all of our past, holding politicians to account, and simply just being herself. I think what I admired most is that she really, she smashed patriarchy as a woman, as a black woman in the media. She didn't have any formal background training in journalism. She wasn't part of any elite club like from Rhodes University or Stellenbosch University, and she came in and she had a voice. She was unapologetic about having a view about politics, whether you agreed or disagreed with you, and she stood her ground. And I think for a lot of young women, and a lot of young black women in particular, you know, she really played that mentor role. We didn't always agree with one another, but she was always there as that voice. And I think her generation had gone through a lot, because Karima was just not a journalist that arrived here. She was also an activist. She had given up a lot in her own personal life for all of us to enjoy freedom, and for me as a black woman to be able to do my craft as a journalist. I think also as a mother, she really had to work very hard to ensure that she gave her son the best possible opportunities. And so, you know, Karima was, I sometimes think she was also a complex woman, because she had to endure a lot. She was in the struggle against apartheid. She became a journalist, and also she held politicians to account, whether from whichever political party, whether she knew them personally. She would not shy away of asking the hard questions. And I think that, you know, I think that's going to be a big, we're going to feel that loss at the channel, because she really would hound politicians and hound those that need to account for their actions. And I think it's going to simply be just a void that we're going to have in our newsroom.
My memory that I'm going to miss the most is us debating and talking about the show that was to happen on a Sunday. And these conversations would sort of start round about Wednesday into Thursday, in preparation for the promo that needed to go out in terms of promoting a show that was coming up on a Sunday. And there was a lot of conversation around that. But there was also a funny moment, because during COVID, Karima was quite anxious about coming into the office if it wasn't necessary. She was quite pedantic about being in an open space with people, afraid of course, contracting the virus. And we had gotten to a point where we had asked her to record the voiceover track of a promo at home. And I remember that the first couple of times it was quite a challenging moment for her, trying to figure out how to record this voiceover track on a phone and then send it into the office so that we can then work on the promo. And there was back and forth phone calls. Eventually her son had to assist her in trying to record that voiceover track for a promo. And I think just that story alone is indicative about how careful Karima really was about COVID-19. And she took every possible precautions. I mean, she was the one presenter that came on air during the early stages of COVID-19, really wearing a mask, wearing gloves on air, constantly sanitizing, and so she was very careful about that. So that's the one thing that I'm really going to remember about her in sort of the work environment.
I knew that if there was a big political story breaking, that Karima could be called on to give us incisive analysis on what was really going on. She could paint out the role players, the positioning. She had a very deep historical knowledge of the ANC, which was unparalleled. She understood what was going on in the party, and I really valued her perspective and her insights. I enjoyed speaking with her for that reason, but also an incredibly intelligent, eloquent woman that wasn't afraid to nail her colours to the mast, that said what she believed was right. And I could trust that because I knew it was underpinned by lots of reading. She would read. I remember once her telling me how much she read every morning before everyone else was awake, that she just couldn't sleep, and she would just read and read and read. So this was someone so deeply entrenched in her craft and so committed to knowledge and information as the basis of everything. And based on that, she would then formulate her opinions, and she had very strong opinions. And as an anchor, it's quite nice to find someone's opinion, because it gives you something to work with. And I enjoyed the conversations that we had on air enormously. I will miss that.
What was quite telling for me about the last communication that I had with Karima, and she was already at the hospital, admitted at the hospital, and we were still communicating because our phone was never far away from her. Right? That was the thing. I think the phone was connected, was part of her hand almost. But in this message, she said that she's in a lot of pain, but she is fighting this virus, that she will not give up. So that for me was really, it symbolized who Karima was. Somebody, despite the difficulty that she was facing, having to battle this virus, she was still hopeful that she'll pull through. And that gave us hope to say that we know who Karima is. She's a strong woman, that she has the courage to pull through. Of course, unfortunately, her flame has blown out, but there's all these positive legacies that I have of Karima.
When I joined eNCA, in the second day, the first person I met was Karima. We were to talk about her program, The Fix, and how I want us to work together on the fix. And since that day, what I will miss mostly with Karima is her forthrightness, openness, and ability to tackle issues, even issues which are uncomfortable. She will tackle them. But from my side, I will miss our late night WhatsApp messages, which she can send probably 10 messages at once. I will miss that. Our debates on political issues and what's happening in the country, I will miss that very dearly, because she had a very deep knowledge about the politics of what's happening in the country. I will miss that mostly from her.
For me, Karima has been more like a sister. Like, I'm gonna miss everything. I mean, I worked with Karima on The Fix, obviously as the producer of the show. And so we talk, or we used to talk, almost every 2 minutes. Everything that's happening in South Africa, she'll send me a message. She'll give me a call. I mean, the only time I wasn't speaking to her is when I'm sleeping, which is like midnight. When I wake up, there's messages. I mean, even though the show was like only 1 hour, the prep that goes into that show, I mean, she'll send me stuff that we need to read, the discussions, the lessons. You know, there'll be stuff that maybe I'm not understanding. And I mean, she's a very articulate person. She knows what she wants. And we'll have those long arguments about what we should be doing. I'm gonna miss the biscuits, the cakes, the nice food. I'm gonna miss the trips we took together to go do interviews, the chats geez, I'm gonna miss a lot of things. I'm gonna miss the fights with the Uber drivers. I mean, all of those things. I'm gonna miss the fights with the ministers in studio. I mean, there's a lot I'm gonna miss, but more than anything else, I've lost a sister.
Karima was, you know, I mean, beyond the veneer of this hard journalist asking a lot of questions, she was a very caring person, always checking in on you, how are you and your daughter doing, and, you know, throughout different spaces and periods in my life. But she was an amazing cook. I mean, Karima could cook up a storm, she could bake. And during lockdown, she joined a group called Lockdown Recipes, and you know, you could really see and taste another aspect of Karima's life, how she allowed herself and she shared her story with thousands of other women across the country, men and women in fact, about her love for baking, how food shaped her own politics, how her mother's cooking had played a pivotal role in her identity, in who she is, and how she was able to share her love of that, you know, just and you know, being from Cape Town, you can imagine she could fuse different food types, you know, from my favorite, which was called the kusista, to bread, to curries, and so yeah, she was a passionate cook and loved to experiment with different types of food, and of course she loved cooking for her son.
We always shared memories, not only about Cape Town, but memories about Joburg in years gone by. And then Karima was a big foodie, so we always used to share on social media recipes. I would be cooking, she would be cooking. She would share some recipes, I would share some recipes, and we'd talk about food because she really, really loved food. It was like part of her DNA, really, and that's really what I'm going to miss about her. She was very, very active on social media, so she was always on the Facebook streets, really, always keeping everybody updated about what is going to happen, what is to happen, and then of course commenting on everybody's statuses, whether it be about politics, whether it be about news, whether it be about food or an outing. So one is really going to miss those things about her, and it is really quite shocking. Yes, on Thursday was quite hard, I think, for most people, knowing that she had contracted the virus, and then of course being admitted to hospital, and then the tragic news on Thursday morning that she had passed away. I think it sent absolute shockwaves, not only through the eNCA newsroom, but through the whole of the country.
I have known Karima since we were both in our 20s working at SAFM, the radio news channel at the SABC, and it was an extraordinary time when we were there in the mid to late 90s, because everything was changing in South Africa, and we had been tasked with setting up a radio station that reflected the new South Africa. There were returning journalists, exiles, people who had phenomenal perspectives on the world and on South Africa, and I was, as a young journalist, young anchor, steeped in that, and was brought into that, and I learned so much from people like Karima and my colleagues at the time, and I got to know her personally at that time as well, more of a sort of personal working relationship. But even in these last years at eNCA, Karima and I would often be sitting in the makeup room together, both getting our makeup done, and the conversation would often start with politics, but move into our families, our children, the things that brought us great joy. And I know how much she loved Mikhail. She just was so proud of him. And I know that when he had a terrible car accident and was so desperately ill, and how her heart broke, and she stood by his side. I also know that she had many close friends, and really at the end of the day, while we are passionate about the profession of journalism, what will remain is the relationships we've built amongst our colleagues at work, but also amongst those closer to us, our family, our friends. And we will be remembered for those relationships and those connections. And the connection I had with Karima is something that I will always treasure and I will value. And I feel a lot of gratitude towards Karima, because she was part of an incredible learning for me as a journalist, and I hope that she's having a very fierce and intellectual conversation with someone somewhere in another realm. And I just hope and pray that her family finds comfort at this terrible time.
Well, the one thing that I can tell you about Karima was that we met more than 20 years ago, right? When both of us worked at the SABC. And even then, I knew that this is a fearless woman, very courageous in the way that she approaches things, and she had strong opinions. Those attributes have not changed over the years. In fact, I think she has become more emboldened, more driven by getting to the truth. And that was always the thing for Karima, always trying to find what is the truth. And of course, with the whole issue about corruption, she didn't back down when it came to corruption and corrupt officials. So over the years, you could see that she did not deviate from her positions. And yes, yet some people might not have agreed with the way she did things, but she was steadfast in what she wanted to do. And me and her often disagreed about the how, but not about the what.
Every day, she was just teaching me how not to give up on something that I believe in. So it's like insisting that no, we're not going to apologize. We're right. We're not going to apologize. Even though you're getting the harassing calls, the messages, everything. And then when we won the case, she was like, this is how you must do things. You must always make sure that you record this. Like you must always be articulate and be proud of what you're doing and take it very serious. Don't just do it. Don't be lax. There's a lot she told me in a very short time. So I think what the public doesn't know is that Karima is such a warm person, very kind. I mean, obviously she has to do her job, but when the cameras are off, she's like the most soft person. You can talk to her, she's willing to help. She doesn't, I mean, I don't even think she understood who she is. Like people will be making a big deal about, hey, you are Karima Brown. And she would just be like, I'm a normal person. She wanted to be somebody that can help. You can call her with anything. If she can, she will help. I mean, she was a friendly person. Like, yeah, that's who she was. And I think we're all gonna miss her. And I still have WhatsApp shares unanswered. Yeah, no. I think I'm gonna miss everything. So.